All right, so it's class project time. We're going to take the girl that we made before with the quick selection tool. We're going to add, instead of copying and pasting it, we're going to add that layer mask. Okay, remember over here. Once you've got a mask for her, I want you to go and find a background. I've found this grass. I don't want you to use the grass. You can use the grass. I'm not going to know. But I'd love for you to go off and find a different background. Use something like Google Images to find a background where you can place her, or use Unsplash to find a background. Then I want you to put them in the image, and then we're going to use the burn tool to try and settle them in there with a bit of a shadow. Now again, I've used grass. You can use anything you like. The weirder the better in my book. I've used super simple grass. Not very exciting, Dan, come on. Now there's one tool in there that you haven't used yet. It's called the burn tool for the shadow. I'm going to keep going in this video and show you how I made this one so that you've got the tools to go off and do your class project. When you're finished, make sure you share it with me. I'd love to see what you did. Take it away, Dan. Okay, so I'm going to be using 07 and 08, right? So let's do this together and you can watch me and then use your own background image. You could even use your own model. Now, one little tip here is it works perfectly for this image just using nothing else other than the quick selection tool. What you can do is you can turn on auto enhance. What it does is it does make a better edge on it. Okay, it does take a lot longer though. So if you've got to watch this, I'm going to click and drag across a bunch of it and then let go. And it took a fraction of a second there, but this is a super duper Mac. Okay, if you've got a really old, whatever the opposite for super duper is, if your laptop is that laptop, you might find it's just not even worth it because it takes so long to do selections. So I'm going to leave it off, okay, because it did a fine enough selection. Okay, basic stuff. I'm going to go and fix it in a sec. This one we have to take a little bit more time doing. Why? Because it's going against a different background. Remember when we put the type behind it, it's pretty forgiving when you're copying something out and pasting it against its own background. That all looks good. So now I'm just going to zoom in, Command plus, Control plus on a PC. Okay, and I'm just going to start adding things like the laces, these shoes here. Do I want to turn auto enhance on? Let's do it. Grab the sole there. Every time I click though, painfully slow. Okay, so what I might do is let's do the hard stuff together. We've done it before in the last tutorial. So what we'll do is I'll get the editor just to speed up my painful, slow selection process, and I'll see you once I've got my selection. Actually, quickly before you do though, if you're watching this video by itself without the larger tutorial, the one thing you will need to know is hold down the Alt key on a PC or Option key on a Mac and just click on the stuff you don't want selected. You can see I didn't want this. I'm just clicking, holding, and painting. Go away. All right, super speedy time. All right, I am back. That is a good enough selection. Now what I'm going to do is remember, not copy and paste onto the other one. I'm going to use my new super sweet layer mask technique. And all I do is click the button. You can see all the black bits there, hide the background, and the white bit shows through her body. Great, grab your move tool, click, hold, drag, drag, drag. I'm putting mine onto quick selection 8. Okay, so you've found your background. The hardest thing about finding a background is getting the perspective right. So there's gonna be lots of trial and error probably for you to find the right background. What I'm also gonna do is I'm gonna transform her down. She's a bit big. I'm gonna zoom out using my Command T or Control T on a PC. And where, this is totally like looking at it going, where does she look believable in this grass? You might argue nowhere, Dan. That's a terrible example. I'm literally got one eye closed and I'm just kind of like, tongue out. Yeah, about there. About there. Hit return. All right, so that is pretty fake. She's just plonked in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a cool little trick to kind of start blending the background a bit more. So with the background layer selected, we're going to use something called the burn tool. Now it's over here. It is this guy. Is that him? Burn tool. By default, it's going to look like this little pedal here. Click and hold that down and grab the burn tool. The burn tool will make things darker. The dodge tool, just so you know, makes things lighter. But the burn tool is good for faking shadows. So grab the burn tool. In terms of the brush size, I'm gonna have to make mine a lot bigger. Actually, I'll leave that bit in there. I was like, why isn't it getting bigger? It's a target on your screen. If I tap caps lock, okay, on my keyboard, turns it back into the circle, which I can make bigger and smaller. Some people just like having caps lock on as a target rather than seeing this big brush. But if you do get lost when you're new, check caps lock, could be that. Okay, how big? I'm gonna have mine at about, you can see up here, about 500. Now drop this down, okay, we're gonna have 500 and we're gonna have the hardness at 0. It just means, can you see kind of the icon there? It's a fuzzy edge. If I go up to 100, you can see it's got a really crisp hard edge, and I want kind of a shadow to have a nice soft edge. Background layer selected, burn tool selected, and in my case, midtones is gonna work, and exposure, play around with that. That's how dark it makes it. And this, you'll depend on your image. If yours quite a dark background, you might have to work with shadows. If it's quite a light background, work with highlights. Just experiment with those three. And all I'm gonna do is this, kind of just paint in. I'm clicking, holding, and dragging my mouse. Can you see I'm just building it up slowly? You might even turn the exposure down a little bit so it's not so aggressive. I'm gonna have mine up so you can see what I'm doing. But when you're working, you might work with a slightly lighter touch. I'll make my brush a bit smaller. Okay, so there's gonna be bits where it looks like she's touching the ground and bits where it isn't. So I'm just trying to cast a shadow for her, basically. I'm happy with that. Enough. It's okay. What I should have done is duplicated the background. So I've got kind of a rect version with all the shadows on and a version that's not rect. By rect, I mean adding the shadow to it. So before you get started, make sure you duplicate this layer and maybe call one called the shadow layer so that you can turn it on and off and see how you did. I'm going to cheat with some editing magic. Okay, you're back. So super fantastic editing. I should have done this at the beginning, but there's my original layer. I've worked on the shadow layer. It's a duplicate of it, but watch, I can turn it on and off now. And what you might find, if you go too hardcore, you can lower the opacity of the shadow layer as well. Watch, if I lower it down, you can kind of like tone it back to, it always happens. You always go too far. You don't know you've gone too far until you've gone too far. So the opacity slider with the original behind it really just is a kind of a nice way of undoing it or moving backwards. One thing we might do as well I'll show you in this case, my one's okay, is the levels. We did this in an earlier tutorial. Remember when we copied and pasted that shoe and it just wasn't the blacks and highlights aren't quite the same. I'm gonna do the same thing for this layer one. I'm even gonna double click layer one and be all special and call this one model. Okay, and with it selected, I'm gonna go to my adjustments, I'm gonna use levels. And remember this option here, it says, I want the levels to only affect the layer just underneath. Click on him. And it means when I play around with this, it only affects that model layer. Cool, so I'm going to just now mess about with this. I don't want to probably play with it too much because mine's okay, but I know in your example, you might find a huge difference in what, you know, the colors from one background to that model is gonna be. All right, so now it is time to go off, find your own background, maybe get the perspective right, copy and paste the girl in with a layer mask. I want to see a layer mask. And you can share it with one of two things. You can just save a JPEG and upload it and share it. Or what you can do is you can send a screenshot. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Now, if I take a screenshot, you can show me your levels and your layer mask. So I know you're not cheating. On a Mac, it's Command-Shift-4. Okay. And Command-Shift-4 gives you this little target here. And you can just drag a box. Ready. Okay. And that will give you an image that's on your desktop that you can share. If you're on a PC, you hit print screen and then you do something with it, I think. You might have to look into what Windows do in terms of screenshots. It's been a little while since I've been on a Windows machine. Otherwise, just do a file, save as JPEG, and I'll take your word for it. Now get creative about where, I put it on the grass. That feels like, yeah, that's pretty basic, Dan, nothing very exciting. It doesn't have to be super realistic. It's technique, we're learning. You can go crazy or you can go super simple like me on some grass. All right, class project over. Let's get into the next video.